you expecting for the Easter egg roll? And we were probably seeing your previous role in this fight.
With respect to the Easter egg roll, it's a huge topic. I appreciate that. I think we're going to have an excellent time. Oh, come on! You can't ask the question and not get the answer. But we have worked really well. I think we're going to have a very enjoyable day on Monday. The tickets have been sent out to all the schools in the area. There'll be a large military contingent that will be participating as well.
Video that's being played across television, United Airlines. Do you think the government should investigate them, the industry as a whole, as it relates to passenger treatment?
I would just say that I think there has been clearly law enforcement is reviewing that situation. I think there's plenty of law enforcement to review a situation like that. And I know United Airlines has stated that they are currently reviewing their own policies. Let's not get ahead of where that review goes. It was an unfortunate incident. Clearly, when you watch the video, it is troubling to see how that was handled.
Does the administration believe that Russia had any advanced knowledge of this chemical attack in Syria? And does the administration believe that Russia may have been complicit in this attack?
At this time, there's no consensus in the intelligence community that that's the case.
Is there any thought within the intelligence community, or are there some strands of the intelligence community?
Again, at this point, the only thing I'm going to say is that there's no consensus within the intelligence community that there was involvement.
The administration has said sanctions against Syria are forthcoming. What will those look like, and when can we expect them?
I think you know well enough at this point that we're not going to announce any of that kind of action until it's ready to go. I think the president's made it clear that additional action with respect to Syria in terms of its failure to stop engaging in actions that harm its people will result in action. And so I'm not going to get ahead of what he is planning to announce or when, but as he has made clear on a variety of circumstances, he's not one to telegraph his actions until he's ready to make those announcements.
Has the administration identified an opposition party that could come to power in Syria if there is a regime change?
Our number one goal is to defeat ISIS. That is unequivocally the number one thing. I think, secondly, the political conditions that exist in Syria right now are such that what we need Russia and others to do is to help create a political environment in which the Syrian people can choose a leader that is more suited to them.
The alliance between Russia and Syria is a strong one. It goes back decades. President Putin has supplied personnel, he supplied military equipment to the Assad government. What makes you think that at this point he's going to pull back in his support for President Assad and for the Syrian government right now?
We didn't use chemical weapons in World War II. You know, you had someone as despicable as Hitler, who didn't even sink to using chemical weapons. So you have to, if you're Russia, ask yourself: is this a country that you and a regime that you want to align yourself with?
Quote, Hitler didn't even sink to the level of using chemical weapons. What did you mean by that?
I think when you come to sarin gas, he was not using the gas on his own people the same way that Assad is doing. I mean, there was clearly. I understand your point. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. There was not in the. He brought him into to the Holocaust Center. I understand that, but I'm saying in the way that Assad used them, where he went into towns, dropped them down to innocent into the middle of towns. It was brought to it. So the use of it. And I appreciate the clarification there. That was not the intent.
The Russian president today said that all this talk from the White House about weapons of mass destruction reminds him of what he heard from the White House in 2003. This White House is expressing confidence that sarin gas was used. What do you say to skeptics in Moscow and maybe in other countries, perhaps here at home, who doubt that level of confidence?
I think that anybody who doubts that, in terms of the pictures that were shown and the media that was there, wouldn't just be doubting the intelligence, but it would be doubting the entire international reporting crew that was there to document all of this. There have been doctors, intelligence communities, media. I mean, I don't think it takes mere eyeballs to recognize what's happening and happen throughout there. So it's not a question of doubting us, it's doubting everybody but Iran, Syria, North Korea, Russia. This is not exactly, a happy time cocktail party of people that you want to be associated with. They are failed states with the exception of Russia.
The question is now whether it's the White House's position that Assad's a bad actor, and it would be ideal if he would go.
or whether the White House thinks that the atrocities that he's committed are absolutely unacceptable and he must go, period.
I don't, as I mentioned yesterday, I don't see a peaceful, stable Syria in the future that has Assad in charge. So it's not a question of how long that alliance has lasted, but at what point do they recognize that they are now getting on the wrong side of history in a really bad way really quickly? And again, look at the countries that are standing with them. Iran, Syria, North Korea. This is not a team you want to be on.
Did the president speak with Secretary Tillerson before he went on this trip to Russia? And is this stern message that the secretary delivered today a direct message from the president to Vladimir Putin?
I don't know where the conversations have laid off, but I think Secretary Tillerson clearly speaks on behalf of the United States in the president's position.
You hope that Secretary Tillerson will be able to clearly convey to the Russians the sentiments of the U.S. government. Is that enhanced by a meeting directly with the Secretary and President Putin? And if there is no meeting like that, would the President of the United States consider his Secretary of State snubbed by the Russian President?
Well, obviously, he's going to meet with Foreign Minister Lavrov. That's his counterpart. I think that's the job of a foreign minister and a Secretary of State, to meet with each other. They're the counterparts. And I think that if he didn't meet with President Putin, that he can convey his sentiments and thoughts of the United States to the foreign minister.
He also said if there was anything that the strike on Syria did, it was to validate the fact that there is no Russia tie, which raises the question that there was some type of political component to this. Can you respond to that?
For all of the discussion about how many ties and back channels and this and that, it was a pretty clear show of resolve and force that the United States was acting and not with anyone else's.
He wasn't suggesting that was a factor.
Almost every single day we've been asked about these so-called ties and back channels and whatever, and I think there was an acknowledgement at some point that if that was true, you would have seen some kind of action that clearly didn't happen.
Did Ivanka Trump play a role in President Trump deciding to strike Syria, and if so, what was that role?
When he himself saw images, he was very, very moved. And I think Ivanka and others, frankly, I don't think that there's many humans that came into contact with the president during that window of time that said, did you see those images on television? So I don't, I think there was a widespread acknowledgement that the images and the actions that have been taken were horrific and required action. 10:30 last Tuesday, his national security team was giving him his presidential daily briefing. They went over what had gone on in Syria in detail. He began to ask a series of questions. They came back to him later that day. There was a deputy principals meeting later on Tuesday. On Wednesday, there was a principals meeting. They continued to bring back with him a series of questions and responses to his thing, and it is evolving. His decision-making process continued aboard Air Force One on the way down to Florida. 4 o'clock when he arrived in Mar-a-Lago, he had a national security team meeting both in Mar-a-Lago and secure VTC back to different elements that were gathered in secure locations. That's when he gave the order.
Is the president giving any thought to reconsidering that aspect of his travel ban?
In terms of letting them in? I think the number one goal of this president is to make sure that we protect our people, our country, and to keep those people from having to flee. They have family there. And so that's our number one goal, is creating a safer environment, de-escalating the conflict there. Is not to figure out how we can fly out. I think the U.S. has been extremely supportive when it comes to the financial piece of this, and looking for ways to work with in a diplomatic fashion. But the goal isn't to figure out how many people we can just import to this country. I think there's clearly a security concern that we have to be.
I also know that you've seen the latest provocations from Pyongyang. The president tweeted this morning that if China won't help, the U.S. will solve the problem.
That's right.
What does he mean by that, solve the problem?
Right. I think he has been very clear that he will not tolerate some of this action by North Korea. But he's also, to answer your question, I think I've said this before on a variety of topics. The president is not one who's going to go out there and telegraph his response. I think he keeps all options on the table. He keeps his cards close to the vest. And as he showed last week with respect to Syria, when the president is willing to act, it's going to be decisive and proportional.
North Korea seemed to threaten the possibility of taking some type of nuclear action if the U.S. launches another, what they see as another provocation. What is the specific reaction to that?
I don't think that threatening something that you don't have the capability of isn't really a threat.
The U.S.S. Carl Vinson sort of steaming up toward the Sea of Japan. that may be an additional pressure to maybe get China to come to the table. Is that an accurate read of what the president would like to see them do to really apply the pressure on Pyongyang?
Well, I think the president and President Xi discussed this last week in Florida. China has had a very economic and political influence on North Korea over the years, and I think that when it comes to a shared national interest of ensuring that Korea doesn't obtain the nuclear capabilities to threaten any people, that is something that we should all agree upon, and something that he talked about with President Xi as an area of shared national interest. A carrier group is several things. The forward deployment is deterrence, presence. It's prudent, but it does a lot of things. It ensures we have the strategic capabilities, and it gives the president options in the region.
If I might, on infrastructure and taxes, the CEO is obviously very interested in trying to get something done as quickly as possible. Shovel-ready opportunities for people to get to work, and obviously a lowering of the taxes to enhance business expansion and perhaps even lowered for middle-class Americans. But I'm wondering if there isn't a healthcare component that needs to happen before you can move forward on that.
So there's a few things. Obviously, getting healthcare, the repeal and replace done, would open the amount of money that we can use through the reconciliation process. We made it very clear from the beginning that we thought healthcare should go first. It gives us a greater amount of resources to dedicate to tax reform. That being said, there's under every circumstance, you're talking months of getting tax reform done. That's one area that they discussed today. But one of the more important areas, and where I think you're seeing the president act continuously and decisively, is on the regulatory front. And that's one of the largest burdens that manufacturers, unions, entrepreneurs talk to the president about over and over again, is these stifling regulations.
Mark Meadows said earlier this morning that he thinks, quote, we're very close as it relates to health care, and that two options were given to the House Speaker. Does the White House believe that you're very close on health care, and have you signed off on those two options?
One, I think we're getting closer and closer every day. This has been a process that, as you know, the Chief of Staff, the Vice President, and others have been extremely engaged in behind the scenes. We clearly are getting closer. More votes are moving in our direction. And these ideas, I think, are very helpful, and the conversations are getting closer. With that, guys, I'll see you back in a little bit. I know we're going to have one more out of our three. Thank you.